Dinner was almost over when it happened. Plates were half empty, the TV was murmuring in the background, and Ebony was helping Timmy cut his food. Felt like an ordinary family night. Quiet. Tense but quiet. Then Ngozi slammed her spoon down so hard it clattered against the plate. "I'm tired of this," she snapped, her voice sharp like broken glass. Everyone looked up. "Tired of what?" Ebony's father asked carefully. Ngozi stood up, her chair scraping loudly across the floor. She pointed straight at Ebony. "Of freeloaders," she screamed. "Both of you. Eating our food. Living in our house like we owe you something." The word hung in the air. Freeloaders. The room went completely silent. Timmy froze. His small hand stopped halfway to his mouth, spoon shaking. His eyes moved from Ngozi's angry face to his mother's. "Mama," he whispered. Ebony felt her chest tighten. She wanted to speak, to explain, to defend herself, but no words came out. Her face burned with shame. She slowly reached over and took the spoon from Timmy's hand. Ngozi wasn't done. "You came back here after your divorce with nothing," she went on. "And now we have to carry you. Carry your child too." Ebony stared at her plate. The food suddenly looked foreign, like it didn't belong to her. She remembered the day she came back home, suitcase in hand, heartbroken, believing family meant safety, believing this was where she would heal. Instead, she was being told she was a burden. Timmy leaned closer to her, pressing his arm against hers. Ebony wrapped an arm around him, forcing a small smile for his sake. But inside, something cracked, deep and painful, and she knew she would never forget this dinner. Ebony didn't say a word after that night. Not when the plates were cleared. Not when the chairs scraped back. Not even when Ngozi muttered under her breath as she walked away. She stayed quiet because fighting back would only make things worse. She had learned that silence was safer in this house. That night, while Timmy slept beside her, Ebony stared at the ceiling and let her mind drift back to the day she came home after her divorce. She had stood at the gate with one suitcase and a tired child, her heart heavy but hopeful. Her marriage had failed, but she believed her family would catch her before she fell. Her mother had hugged her and said, "This is your home. Rest." Those words had kept her alive. First, things seemed fine. She helped in the kitchen, woke up early, cleaned without being asked. She bought groceries quietly and paid small bills when no one was watching. She told herself this was temporary. She would rebuild. She always did. But slowly the air changed. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. Sighs grew louder. Every small mistake felt like proof that she didn't belong. If Timmy spilled water, it became a problem. If he laughed too loudly, someone complained. If he asked for seconds at dinner, eyes rolled. Ebony started to shrink. She ate less. She spoke less. She learned how to move through the house without making noise. She waited until everyone was done eating before she touched her food. Sometimes she wasn't even hungry. She just didn't want to be noticed. The worst part wasn't the insults. It was the way they talked about her when they thought she couldn't hear. "She's still here. How long will this last? She should be grateful." Grateful. As if pain was a favor. Ebony remembered the nights she cried silently into her pillow so Timmy wouldn't hear. She remembered holding him close and whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "It will get better," she told him. "Mama's here." She needed him to believe that, even when she didn't. Every morning, she looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. This woman walked on eggshells in her own childhood home. This woman apologized for existing. This woman carried shame that didn't belong to her. She had come back broken, yes, but not empty. Still, they made her feel like a burden overnight. Like love had conditions. Like home had rules she could never meet. Ebony never argued. Never raised her voice. She swallowed every word and smiled through every insult. But deep inside something was changing. The silence she wore like armor was getting heavy. And she was starting to understand something painful but clear. Staying quiet was costing her more than leaving ever would. After that, the words started coming every day. Not shouted. Not always angry. Sometimes calm. Sometimes said with a small laugh. But they cut just the same. "This is my house." her father would say when Ebony tried to explain anything. And in my house I decide, her mother would add. You should remember where you are sleeping. Roofs are not free. Ebony nodded, always nodded. She kept her eyes low and her voice soft. Yes, Mama. Yes, Papa. They reminded her constantly. At breakfast, at dinner, even in passing, that she was eating their food, using their water, sleeping under their roof, that she should be grateful, that she should not talk too much, that she should not complain. Sometimes her father would joke, if you don't like it, you know the door. He would laugh after saying it, but Ebony never laughed back, because she knew it wasn't really a joke. Once, when Timmy was sick and cried through the night, her mother knocked hard on the door. We all have to wake up because of your child, she snapped. Remember, this is not your house. Those words stayed with Ebony all day. She wanted to say something. So many times the truth burned on her tongue. She wanted to say she bought groceries almost every week, that she paid the electricity bill more times than anyone knew, that the money she sent years ago wasn't small, wasn't borrowed, wasn't a gift, but she never said it, because correcting them would bruise their pride, because she didn't want to shame her parents, because she thought silence was respect, so she let the lie live. She let them believe she was surviving on their kindness. She let them believe she owed them everything. She let them believe she had nothing. Each reminder pushed her a little smaller. Each threat made her chest tighten. Don't forget where you came from, they would say, as if divorce had erased her worth, as if returning home made her a child again. At night, she lay awake listening to the house creak, wondering how something she helped protect could feel so unsafe. She held Timmy close and whispered, "Be quiet, my love." Not because he was wrong, but because she was scared. Scared that one wrong word, one small mistake, would send them both out into the night. My house, my rules, her father said again one evening, looking straight at her. Ebony felt the weight of it settle deep in her chest. She nodded like always. But inside something hardened, because the truth she kept swallowing was this. The roof they used to control her was never truly theirs alone. And one day, the lie would no longer protect anyone. Ebony often thought about that house. Not as it was now, heavy, cold, full of sharp words, but as it was years ago, when it almost slipped away from her parents' hands. Back then, her father used to sit quietly at the table, staring at unpaid bills. The laughter in the house had faded. Her mother spoke less. Neighbors whispered. The bank letters came in thick envelopes, stamped in red. Ebony noticed everything, even when no one said a word. One evening, she heard her parents arguing in low voices. The mortgage was months behind. The bank had given a final warning. If they didn't pay, the house would be taken. That night, Ebony didn't sleep. At the time, she was still married. She had a good job, and she had savings she had built slowly, carefully. It wasn't easy money. It was years of working late, saying no to comfort, planning for a future she believed in. The next morning, she made a decision without telling anyone. She went to the bank alone. Her hands shook as she spoke to the clerk. She didn't want her name attached. She didn't want questions. She didn't want praise. She asked for an anonymous transfer, a full payment that would clear everything. When the clerk told her the amount, her heart skipped. It was almost everything she had. But she nodded anyway, because this house was more than walls. It was her parents' pride, their proof of a lifetime of work. She couldn't bear the thought of them losing it, or knowing their daughter had to save them. So she paid. Weeks later, the letters stopped coming. The tension in the house eased. Her father laughed again. Her mother slept better. They never knew why the pressure lifted. They just said, God made a way. Ebony smiled and agreed. She never told her husband, never told her parents, never told anyone. She kept the receipts locked away, the truth folded neatly into silence. Years passed. Her marriage fell apart. Life humbled her in ways she never expected. And somehow, she found herself back in the same house she had once saved, now being told she was a burden in it. Every time they said, "You are living under our roof," her chest tightened. Every time they reminded her to be grateful, she swallowed the truth, because if she spoke, it would change everything. It would shame her father. It would wound her mother. It would turn love into a fight. So she stayed quiet. The house stood strong, warm in the sun, protected by a secret only Ebony carried. A secret built on sacrifice, love, and silence. They saw a freeloader. They never saw the woman who had once stood at a bank counter and saved their home without asking for a single thank you. The words came on an ordinary afternoon. No shouting, no drama. Just one careless sentence that changed everything. Chibuzo was counting something on his phone, shaking his head. "Life is expensive," he said. "Too many mouths to feed." Ebony didn't look up. She had learned how to pretend not to hear. Then he added, almost joking, "Especially when there is extra weight in the house." Ebony froze. Timmy was sitting on the floor nearby, lining up his toy cars. He looked up slowly. "Uncle," he asked, confused. "What is extra weight?" The room went quiet. Ebony felt something break inside her. Not loudly. Not all at once. It was a soft crack, like a glass finally giving up after too much pressure. She smiled tightly and pulled Timmy closer. "Go play in the room, my love," she said gently. He hesitated. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," she whispered, kissing his forehead. "Never." When Timmy left, Ebony stood there, her heart racing. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. But what hurt most was the fear that her son had heard enough to remember. That night, Timmy didn't want to eat much. He pushed his food around and finally asked in a small voice, "Mama, am I heavy?" Ebony's chest tightened so hard she could barely breathe. "No," she said quickly, pulling him into her arms. "You are not heavy. You are a gift." "But Uncle said." "I don't care what anyone says," she cut in, her voice shaking. "You are loved. Do you hear me?" Timmy nodded, but his eyes were unsure. That was it. Ebony sat awake long after he fell asleep, watching his chest rise and fall. She thought about all the times she had swallowed insults meant for her. She thought about how she had learned to stay quiet, to bend, to disappear. But this was different. This was her child. She realized then that staying was teaching Timmy a dangerous lesson. That love had to be earned. That his presence was a problem. That he should make himself smaller to be accepted. She refused to let that happen. Ebony remembered the bank, papers, the truth she had hidden for years. She remembered why she stayed silent, and why silence was no longer an option. By morning her decision was made. She would not raise her son in a house where he felt unwanted. She would not let his childhood be shaped by shame the way hers had been. They could call her anything they wanted, but they would never again call her child extra weight and expect her to stay. That was the moment Ebony chose her son over everyone else. The next morning, Ebony woke up before the sun. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy instead of peaceful. She watched Timmy sleeping and felt her heart squeeze. She brushed his hair back gently and whispered, "I'll fix this." She didn't cry. Not anymore. Her tears were done. She made tea and sat at the small table with her phone in her hand. For a long time she just stared at it. This was not an easy step. This was not anger. This was clarity. She scrolled through old contacts until she found the name she hadn't used in years. Mr. Lamine Touré. He had helped her once before, long ago, when she handled the house payment quietly. He was calm, sharp, and careful with secrets. She trusted him. Her fingers trembled as she pressed call. "Ebony," he said after a pause. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you again." They met later that day in his small office. Nothing fancy. Just clean walls, a wooden desk, and quiet respect. Ebony placed a thin folder on the table and pushed it toward him. "These are the papers," she said. "The deed. The transfer receipts. Everything." He opened the folder slowly, reading without interrupting. When he looked up, his expression changed. Not surprised, just serious. "So," he said gently, "you own the house?" Ebony nodded. "I always have." "And what do you want to do?" She took a deep breath. "I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want revenge. I just want peace. I want my child to feel safe." Mr. Touré leaned back in his chair. "Boundaries," he said. "Yes," Ebony replied. "That's all." She explained everything. The insults, the threats, the way her son had started to doubt himself. Her voice stayed calm, but her hands told the truth. They shook. No child should grow up like that, Mr. Ture said firmly. They talked for a long time. About options. About timing. About doing things cleanly and legally. No shouting. No drama. Just facts. When she stood to leave, Mr. Ture said, "You protected them once. Now you're protecting yourself." That sentence stayed with her. Outside, the air felt lighter. Ebony walked slowly, her shoulders a little straighter than before. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't heartless. She was a mother choosing safety. That night, she looked at Timmy and smiled for real for the first time in weeks. She didn't tell him everything. She didn't need to. All he needed to know was this. Mama was finally setting boundaries. And this time she wasn't backing down. The notice appeared on the table on a quiet afternoon, placed neatly beside the fruit bowl like it belonged there. White paper. Clean envelope. No noise. No warning. Ngozi was the first to see it. She picked it up, frowning. "What is this?" she asked, already annoyed. Her eyes scanned the page. Then she laughed. Loud, sharp laugh. "Eviction," she scoffed. "Who is evicting who in this house?" She waved the paper in the air and turned toward Ebony. "Is this one of your dramas now? Are you trying to scare us?" Ebony stood by the doorway, calm. "Come. It's real," she said softly. Ngozi laughed again, louder. "From who?" "You." She shook her head and tossed the paper back onto the table. "You can't even feed yourself without us." Ebony didn't move. She reached into her bag and pulled out another document. Thicker. Official. She placed it slowly next to the notice. "This is the deed," she said. "Please read it." Ngozi rolled her eyes but grabbed the paper. Her smile faded as she scanned the page. She read it once. Then again. Her lips moved silently. Then she saw the name. Bunyade. The room went still. "What is this?" Ngozi whispered, her voice suddenly small. Her husband leaned over her shoulder. Her face drained of color. This isn't funny," she said. "You forged this." Ebony shook her head. "I didn't." Her parents came in, drawn by the raised voices. Her father picked up the papers, confused at first, then stiff. His hands trembled. "I don't understand," he said. "This house is mine." Ebony swallowed. "I paid it off years ago." Quietly. "I never put my name forward because I didn't want to shame you." Silence fell like a heavy cloth. Ngozi's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "So all this time," her mother whispered, "we were living in a house I protected," Ebony finished gently. Ngozi exploded. "How dare you hide this? How dare you bring police papers into this house?" "These are not police papers," Ebony said. "They are legal papers." The laughter was gone now. In its place was fear. Ebony didn't smile. She didn't enjoy this moment. Her heart ached, but she stood firm. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," she said. "I'm doing this so my child can grow up without being called a burden." No one spoke. The papers lay on the table, quiet but powerful. And for the first time, the house that had been used to control Ebony no longer belonged to their words, but to the truth. The house changed after that day. Not slowly, not gently. Changed all at once. The shouting stopped. The sharp words disappeared. Doors closed softly now. People spoke in whispers like the walls might be listening. Ebony noticed it immediately. Her father no longer raised his voice. He avoided her eyes. Her mother moved around the house nervously, cleaning things that were already clean. Ngozi stayed in her room for hours, phone pressed to her ear, pacing. Then the calls started. Ebony's phone rang while she was walking Timmy to school. She didn't answer. It rang again and again. Missed calls stacked on the screen like warnings. When she finally answered, her mother's voice cracked. "My daughter, let us talk." Ebony closed her eyes. That afternoon, her father knocked on her door. Not hard. Not demanding. A gentle knock. "We didn't know," he said, his voice low. "If we had known." "You did know how you treated us," Ebony replied quietly. He had no answer for that. Tears came next. Real tears. Her mother cried while holding her hands. "We are your parents," she sobbed. "You can't do this to us. Where will we go?" Ebony felt the old pull in her chest. Guilt, responsibility, the habit of fixing things. But she stayed still. "I asked for respect," she said. "I didn't get it." Ngozi tried a different way. She sent long messages. Apologies wrapped in excuses. "I was stressed. I didn't mean the child. We are family." Family. That word again. At night, Ebony lay awake listening to voices on the other side of the wall. Crying. Whispering. Regret moving too late. Her phone buzzed constantly. Calls she didn't answer. Messages she read but didn't reply to. She wasn't cold. She wasn't cruel. She was tired. Tired of being strong for everyone else. Tired of being small so others could feel big. Tired of apologies that only came when power changed hands. One evening her father said softly, "We raised you." Ebony nodded. "And I honored you." Quietly. Silence followed. The begging grew louder as the days passed. Promises were made. Voices shook. But the words felt empty now, like rain after a fire had already burned everything. Ebony watched Timmy laugh in the yard, free and unaware. She knew she had chosen right. Because love that arrives only when fear appears is not love. And apologies that come too late cannot undo the damage already done. Ebony stood in the middle of the living room, Timmy holding her hand tightly. The papers were still on the table, neat and official, but they no longer needed to speak for her. She was ready to speak for herself. Her parents and Ngozi sat across from her, faces pale, voices quiet. The anger that had ruled the house for years had faded, replaced by fear and confusion. Ebony took a deep breath. "I need to say something," she began, her voice calm, steady. "I know you're surprised, maybe angry, maybe hurt, but you need to hear the truth." They leaned forward slightly, as if bracing for a storm. But there was no storm coming, only truth. "I never wanted power over this house," she said softly. "I didn't want to control you. I didn't want revenge. I wanted something much simpler." Her eyes met her father's, then her mother's, then Ngozi's. "I wanted respect, for me, and for my child. That's all. Respect for our lives. Respect for our choices. Respect for the fact that we belong here, not as burdens, not as problems, but as human beings who deserve love and dignity." She paused, letting the words sink in. She could see the confusion, the disbelief. It was almost funny if it weren't so sad. "You treated me like I was less," she continued. "Like my son was less. You called us freeloaders, told me to be grateful, laughed when I tried to explain, made me feel small every single day. I stayed quiet because I wanted peace. I stayed quiet because I loved you. But silence is heavy, and I can't carry it anymore." Timmy squeezed her hand, and she bent slightly to kiss his forehead. "This isn't about money. It's not about who owns what. It's about being treated like we matter." Her mother tried to speak, but Ebony held up a hand. "I know you think I'm angry. I'm not. I'm just done being invisible. I'm done teaching my child that being here, being alive, is a problem. I'm done being small so you can feel big. That's not love. That's not family." She looked at them one last time, calm but firm. "I'm asking for respect. That's it. If you can give that, we can find a way forward. If not, we move forward anyway. I'll protect my son, and I'll protect myself." The room was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. But the weight in the air had shifted. The balance had changed. For the first time, Ebony wasn't shrinking. For the first time, she wasn't apologizing for existing. She squeezed Timmy's hand again, gently. "We are here. We are real. And we will not disappear to make anyone comfortable." And in that quiet, heavy room, the truth settled. It wasn't anger or revenge. It was simple, strong, unshakable. They deserved respect, and nothing less would do. Ebony held Timmy's hand tightly as they walked to the front door. The house behind them was silent, empty of the yelling and sneers that had followed them for years. Every step toward the gate felt lighter, as if a weight she had carried her whole life was finally lifting. Timmy looked up at her with wide eyes. "Mama, are we leaving for good?" he asked softly. Yes, my love, she said, squeezing his hand. We're leaving, and this time we don't have to look back. She paused at the doorway and took a deep breath, letting the smell of fresh air fill her lungs. It was a scent she hadn't noticed in years, drowned out by tension and fear. She looked at the house one last time, the walls where insults had been shouted, the chairs that had held so much judgment, the table that had seen too many tears. All of it belonged to the past now. Timmy skipped ahead a little, holding her hand but still full of childlike excitement. Look, Mama. The sun is shining. She laughed softly, a sound she hadn't allowed herself in months. Yes, baby, it is. And we're free to enjoy it. They walked down the driveway, feeling the gravel crunch beneath their shoes, each step a little declaration of independence. Ebony's heart swelled, not with anger, not with revenge, but with pride. She had protected her son. She had protected herself, and for the first time she felt whole. No more fear of insults. No more whispers behind her back. No more needing approval to exist. She was finally free. Free to live, free to breathe, free to teach Timmy that he was loved and valued, always. At the gate, she stopped and looked at him. Are you ready? Timmy nodded, smiling. Yes, Mama. Hand in hand, they stepped out together, leaving the house and all its memories behind. The quiet behind them was no longer heavy or frightening. It was stillness. It was peace. Ebony let go of the last bit of doubt that had held her down. She didn't feel fear anymore. She felt strong. She felt proud. She felt free. And as they walked toward their new life, the sun shining over them, she knew this was the beginning, not just of leaving the house, but of finally living on her own terms.